We're great colleagues, do a lot of teamwork here, but we're really delighted to have you join us this morning. And this is an important step in the process, I think, explaining the application process for you. So I'm going to start that right away, so that we can cover everything. So the first thing I would ask is, if you have not already completed our online inquiry form, please do that as soon as the session is over. And I'm going to send you an email in probably about an hour or so after the session ends with all this information. So don't worry about writing it down. You're going to get this all in an email. Listen, take notes if you want, but don't worry about this being the only time you see this information. But it's important that we have you fill out that inquiry form so that you get into our database system. That's how we have you in the system. That's how we can communicate with you, create your application file. So it's very important, if you haven't done that, that you do that tonight, so that we get you into our database and we can start working with you more closely and send you information. The timeline for the Next Junior Scholarship Program is really, really tight. The application is due January 1st. The selection is the third week in January. That sounds like a lot of time, but it's really not, because there's a lot of work you have to do and others have to do to support your application. And one of the complicating factors is we close for 2 weeks in December and early January for the US holidays. So from December 20th through January 3rd, we're not open. So we're not processing any applications. We're not processing any materials. So if you wait until early January to send your materials in, it's really much more complicated for us to get everything into the system and get your application complete and ready for review. So while you have a January 1 deadline, I want to really strongly encourage you to have your application into us no later than 15th of December, so that we have your application and as many of your supporting materials as possible. We want to give you full consideration of this process. And if your application becomes late, complete late in the process, it's harder for us to do that. So I would really strongly encourage you to have your application here by December 15th. The latest possible day for you to have everything here, your supporting materials, is the 12th of January. So again, it sounds like a long time, but you've got a couple of weeks and we're closed for 2 weeks. And then you've got like 10 days essentially after that to make sure everything's here. So I just want to emphasize as strongly as I can how important it is that you make this a priority in coming weeks, so that we have your application, we can give you full consideration. And I appreciate it's a lot of work. We know that. And it's a lot of coordination with other people as well. So we appreciate that. But this is very important. We want to give you full consideration and read a complete application. So again, I just want to emphasize that if you can submit the application no later than the 15th of December, and plan on having all of the supporting materials here no later than the 12th of January, earlier if possible. If you have any questions about that, we've got time for questions at the end of this, so we can cover that at that time. I want to encourage you to look at some of our web pages right now, not right now, but tonight or tomorrow, because a lot of the information you may have about Dickinson, about the application process, about how to accomplish a complete application is in these web pages. So again, you get this in email with active links. The International Admissions webpage, International Student Admissions has helpful information, the International Student Scholarship and Financial Aid page, and the International Student FAQ page, I think will have some really helpful information for you as well. So I would really encourage you to review those if you haven't already before you start the application, because I think it will help you better understand our process, and also better understand Dickinson as well. And many of the questions you may have about completing the application are covered in those web pages. As soon as you submit your application, you'll get an email from us in a day or so that will give you information and instructions for creating your application portal. This is how you can check the status of your application. It tells you what we've received. It tells you what's still missing. It gives you other links that might be helpful in getting to know Dickinson. But this is something you should be checking every day for information, because this will tell you what the status of your application, when it's complete, and as I said earlier, what we've received and what's still missing. And we rely on you checking on that to know the status of your application. So that'll come again in a day or so after you've actually submitted the application. So another good reason to get the application in as soon as you can. And again, it'll give you instructions for setting up the portal. After that, you're able to just log in and check it whenever you'd like. This is also where you will find the online International Student Certification of Finances form, and I'll talk about that later, but that's a form that we require, and it's completed online, and you can access that on your portal, but I'll talk more about that form in a minute. So what are the important parts of the application process? Obviously, the common application itself, the first step you'll need to take is to actually create an application with a common application. And in the FAQ and in the international admissions instructions on our web pages, we give you the link to the common application. If you've got questions about the common application itself and how to complete it, there's a help feature on the common application. So there's links to that from our web page. In case you've got any questions, it gives you information how to get support from common application. But the important parts of the common application for us include the personal statement or essay. And this is the part of the process that is your voice in the application. Most of the other things we look at are either someone or something else telling us who you are. Transcripts showing your exam scores and your internal grades, recommendations from a counselor and teacher. If you submit SATs or ACTs, those scores. So the important part of the statement is that this is your voice. This is how we learn about you directly from you. So it's very important for us for a number of reasons. One is we want to get to know you beyond just numbers and grades. We want to know how well you can communicate, especially how well you write complex thoughts and your grammar and spelling, and your ability to communicate effectively in writing. That's a very important part of the Dickinson experience. And we could talk at length about the personal statement. There are 6 different questions that you can choose from, one of which is a topic of your choice. My suggestion is you read the questions carefully. They have 2 parts typically. So for example, one is essentially describe a situation or an event that's had an impact on your life. So what many students will do is they'll tell us about an event or an experience, but what they don't do is answer the question. They don't tell us how it influenced or changed their life. That's the heart of that question. It's the second half. How did it impact you? How did you change because of that experience or that person or that event? So these questions are designed for you to be introspective, to think about yourself, and to share with us something about that. So be sure that you don't just focus on the first half of the question, describing an event, describing a person, but really talk about the introspection part, how that's changed or influenced you. That's what we're really looking for in this process. The other part of the common application that's very important for us is what you do outside of academics. Our students are very engaged. We talk about engagement here a lot at Dickinson College, and we want you to be engaged fully in the classroom, but also outside the classroom. So one way for us to get a sense of how you might be able to contribute and be a part of the Dickinson community is to get a sense of what you do outside of academics in high school, secondary school. We don't make value judgments about what you do. It's not better to do one activity versus another activity, but it is important that we get a sense of what's important to you. So on the common application, you can list some of those events. You can tell us how many hours per week you spend with them, any leadership roles you might have. All of that's important for us to get a sense, again, of what you like to do. And for some people, that might be working. For some people, that might be a school club. For some people, it might be an activity outside of school totally. That's all fine. But we just like to get a sense of what's important to you. We're looking for depth of interest and involvement. We're not looking for a long list of activities that you've barely been involved with. We really want to focus on the ones that have been most important to you, that you've committed the most time to. And any accomplishments you've been able to make through those activities is important to share with us as well. The next part of the transcript or the application that's important is something called a school report. And on the application, when you get to this part, you'll be asked to indicate the name of your college advisor, college counselor, university advisor, their name, the name of your school, and the email address of that counselor. This is very important. What will then happen is when you've completed that part of the application, that person will get an email from the common application saying that you have applied, you've asked them to serve as your school counselor, and that they're going to provide a school report, a transcript, and a recommendation. So it's very important you choose the right person. If your school does not have a university advisor, you may want to approach the head of your school or the school principal and ask them to serve in that function. Because we do need that from sort of a senior person, the person who can coordinate all of those materials. So that's important that you know who you can communicate with and who that person will be. If you're not sure, definitely be talking to someone in your school administration about who can serve in that role. Excuse me here. And I'll talk about transcripts in the next slide, recommendations. We are SAT and ACT optional. That means we do not require either of those standardized tests. You are welcome to submit them, but you do not have to. And I know many times students feel like, well, it says optional, but will it hurt my chances if I don't submit the testing? No, it will not hurt your chances if you don't submit the testing. It truly is optional. Our advice is if you've taken the SAT or the ACT and you think that the score results reflect you as a student, you are welcome to submit those scores. If you've taken them and you're not happy with them, you think you're a better student than those scores suggest, you don't have to submit them. We don't use them if you don't submit them. It doesn't hurt you in admissions. It does not hurt you for scholarship consideration either. So it truly is optional. So you do not have to submit those. If you do choose to submit them, you're required to submit them to us officially by going to the College Board or the ACT organization and requesting the official results be sent to us. You can submit self-reported scores, but you do eventually have to submit the official scores. But at this point, you could put them on your application. There's a section on the application where you can indicate any test scores you've taken and have received. So you can do that, but then you should also submit official test results to be sent directly to Dickinson College. And I'll talk about the International Student Certification of Finances and Financial Aid application in a few minutes. So transcripts. This can be a challenging part of the process, and this is something that we often spend a lot of time communicating with students at schools about. So I want to sort of clarify what we're looking for in terms of academic transcripts for your application. If you're in one of the India curricula, the ISCE, CBSE, a state board, we require your internal mark sheets from standards 9, 10, 11, and 12. And also, we require your standard 10 examination scores, and including the pass certificate or positional scores. And from your school, we request predicted standard 12 exam scores. So someone in your school has to give us a sense of what your expected score results will be when you take the final standard 12 exams early next year. So we need both the internal mark sheets, the standard 10 exam scores that have been completed with the certificate, or the positional scores, and your predicted scores for standard 12 exams. And again, it's important for us to get the standard 12 pass certificate with the positional grades. Many times I know you've changed schools after standard 10, so you may need to go back to your standard 10 school to get those results sent. You need to coordinate that. So again, this is why it takes time to get all the application materials together. If you're in another curriculum, again, we need a transcript or mark sheets for all 4 years of secondary school. If you've done IGCSEs or O levels, we need those results and the predicted scores, for example, for advanced level exams or international baccalaureate or whatever curriculum you're in. But we do need some kind of grade report for this last year that you're currently in. And again, if you've attended more than one high school, we need your academic transcripts and mark sheets from all of those schools, not just the one you're currently in. If for any reason your transcripts or exams are not in English, they need to be translated into English. And please contact me if you've got any specific questions about your situation and transcripts, and we can sort of clarify that for you. Recommendations are very important for us at Dickinson. And again, we admit people, not numbers. So we want to get to know you as a person. And again, one of the best ways for that to happen is through the personal statement or essay in the common application. But another way is through the recommendations. So we require one recommendation from a university advisor or counselor. As I said earlier, if you don't have someone in that role in your school principal or the head of school can provide that. And we require one teacher recommendation. And the best recommendation will come from someone who knows you well. So it's not the case that, for example, if you want to study biology, that you have to have a recommendation from your biology teacher. That's great if your biology teacher knows you. But the best recommendations in our experience come from teachers that know you really well. So they don't necessarily have to be from the discipline you want to study. They just have to be from somebody who knows you very well. When you ask someone to write a recommendation, be sure that you give them some information. Why have you asked them to write the recommendation? What would you like them to highlight about you as a student? You might want to remind them the other things you do outside of academics. The more they know about you, the more that they can complete and write in that application, and the more you come to life when we read it. You're welcome to submit an additional or third recommendation, but we don't need more than that. We don't need 5 or 6 recommendations. You should be able to get a good set of recommendations from the counselor and at least 2 teacher recommendations, but we really don't need more than that. And again, in the process for recommendations, on the Carlisle application, we'll ask you to list the name and the email address of the teachers you're asking to write recommendations. They will then get an email from Common Application, as your counselor does, and they'll be giving instructions for how to complete the online recommendation form and how to submit it. So that'll happen automatically once you provide their name and email address on your application when you complete and submit it. That's the academic part of the transcript. There are 2 other documents that are more financial related. One is the certification of finances. This is a document that we require all applicants to complete. It's used if you're admitted and enrolled. It's used to issue the visa documentation that you'll need in order to get an F1 student visa. So it's a very important document, and I want to give you some information about it because this oftentimes is the one document that is the last thing people are able to submit. It takes some time because you need to work with some other outside entities to complete it. But the certification of finance will be available online. Once you submit your application and get your portal information, you can then go to the portal, complete this application or this form online. I'm going to send you in a separate email instructions for completing the form and for the documentation we need. But essentially, the certification is where we ask you and your family to indicate and document the amount of funding you can contribute for your study at Dickinson without considering any financial aid you're going to get. What can you and your family contribute to the cost of your education? This is a very important document for us. Again, it's used not only for us to assess your application for admission, but it's also used to issue an I-20 for F1 student visa. So on the certificate of finances, you're able to indicate 4 different sources of funding. One is from your family savings or bank account. And so if you say, for example, and it's got to be in US dollars, it cannot be in ruby, it needs to be in US dollars. And so, for example, if your family says they can provide 10,000, the equivalent of 10,000 US dollars in rupees from your bank account, you need to submit a letter from your bank saying that you have at least that amount of money in rupees, the equivalent of 10,000 US dollars in your bank account. So we need that bank letter. So this requires you and your family to work with your bank to get this. The second source of funding is from your family income. And this is a very confusing part of the form. We're not asking you to list and tell us your entire family income. We're asking you to indicate what part of that income does your family expect to use to contribute to the cost of your education. And that might be 0. Your family might be just doing it from whatever's in their bank account. But if they are going to use part of their income to help pay for your cost of attendance at Dickinson, you need to put the part of that total income that they're going to contribute, not all of their income. So oftentimes we get the form and it will give total income. That's not what we're looking for. Again, I want to stress, it's that part of the total income that they will use to contribute to pay for your education. To document that funding, you need to provide something from your parent or parent's employer that verifies their income. So that an earnings statement, a wage statement, something that verifies your income. So again, this is why it's important to start with this document early, because this is not something you can do just in a day or so. Your parents will have to work with your employers, with their bank to get these documents. The third source of funding is a sponsor. So if your uncle is going to pay for part of your education, this is where that would be indicated. With that, we need a letter from that sponsor saying that, yes, they're going to sponsor you for 4 years to provide so much funding per year. And for them, we also need the source of the funding, either the bank statement or the income verification. And finally, there's another part for other sources of funding. That can be a scholarship. This should only be filled out if you already have a scholarship that you can document. So, for example, don't put down what you think you might get from Dickinson or what you might get from Next Genius. This is only if you've already been awarded a scholarship that can document that. So most students don't fill that part out. I know this sounds a little confusing, but again, we're going to send you information and instructions for completing that form. But the important thing is this takes time to complete. This takes working with your parents. This takes time working with banks and employers. So this is something you need to work with your parents on right away, because in our experience, this is usually the document that is the last thing that's submitted, it's sometimes not submitted properly. So we really want you to work on this as quickly as possible. The other important part of this is that any amount in rupees or any other currency in these documents needs to be converted to US dollars. And we have information on how to convert that so that we get it the correct amount. We rely on you to convert your currency, not us. And again, any letters or documents needs to be in English if it's in the originals in any other language. And finally, talk about the financial aid application. If you are applying for need-based financial aid, the financial aid application that we strongly prefer, is the CSS profile. And I'll send you the link to that form. If you're not able to complete the CSS profile, you can request the alternative financial aid application. We can send you that, but we strongly prefer that you send us the CSS profile. Again, these documents take time to complete. They ask detailed information about family income, family assets like property, any stocks, any other assets, family expenses, size of family, siblings, whether you have siblings in college and university. So it asks a lot of detailed information. So you and your family really need to start working on this as soon as possible, because again, this tends to be a document that people submit really late in the process. And I just want to emphasize that your application will not be read without the financial aid application. If you are applying for financial aid, it will not be read without the certificate of finances. So these, while not academic transfer documents, are financial documents that we have to have in order to look at your application. That's a lot of complicated, detailed information, and I apologize for it. Sounds very bureaucratic. Sadly, it is. This is a bit of a bureaucratic process, but all of these documents are required for a reason. The reason is we need to know about you in order to evaluate and understand your academic preparation, how well you fit for Dickinson, and why you would be a good student here at Dickinson. So all of this is for a purpose. We're not asking any of this just because it's something we don't have, we want you to do for just any old reason. It's really important for us to have this information.